Hey guys, so I went to the Manasses battlefield take the Corgi out so we could run around and check it out. Anyway, they were doing live fire there, believe it or not. And so here is a footage of them explaining the history behind the battlefield and shooting guns and shooting cannons and stuff.
Fire!
Oh wow.
Cease fire!
Cool.
Secure the peace!
Oh my goodness.
Woo!
That was cool.
Lived in until 1920. The earlier structure that was sitting here, July 21 of 1861, got riddled pretty thoroughly with projectiles. Small arms fire, tens of thousands of bullets flying through the air throughout the afternoon. A couple dozen big guns, artillery pieces like the one we've got here, are booming throughout the afternoon hours as well. That earlier structure, again, riddled with projectiles. And then it was picked apart for use on campfires in the first winter of the war. The Confederates win the battle. They stay in the neighborhood for the next 8 months. It does get chilly here in the winter. At that point, about 50,000 guys living within a few miles of where we are. They need wood to stay warm and cook meals. The earlier house was picked apart for use on campfires. Within the park, there were dozens of civilian structures dotting what's now the checkerboard of the fields and forests. A lot of them fall victim to Army activity in the 1860s. Behind most of you, tucked down in the valley though, there is one of the three survivors, the stone house. It's made of a more substantial material than wood. That's the primary reason why it withstands the man-made storms. Not going to be picked apart for use on fires when it's made of stone. Now, besides the waysites that you can read, the monuments, the artillery pieces, which are all mute reminders for us about when the armies were out here, a handful of occasions throughout the year we have living history, and that's what we're embarking upon together now. Bear in mind, it's only a handful of guys with a handful of guns going off a handful of times. Use your imagination. Try to envision thousands going off pretty continuously in this relatively confined area. Today we're firing blanks. You have to imagine projectiles, the whistling of objects. The Confederates, throughout most of the afternoon's action, were in that tree line over there, the Union battle position, the artillery line here astride the house. The distance between us and the trees is about the effective range of the infantry tools that they're carrying right here. So little lead objects, 58 caliber slugs, are flying from where we are towards the tree line and back and forth. And the big guns are able to fire their bigger objects accurately a little over time. Now all the soldiers on both sides, we call them soldiers, we call them armies, but in this first big battle of the war, first Manasses or first Bull Run, they're first timers. They're amateurs. They're civilians like you, like me, put in military attire like we are today. They got more drill and training than they cared for in those first few weeks and months. Both sides wanted to kind of get on with it, test their mettle against the foe, earn battle laurels, get honorable wounds, in what's going to be a quick and relatively bloodless and easy victory. Out here, both sides are going to learn some lessons the hard way, that they haven't yet had enough drill and training. The chaos, the stresses of a battle, the din, the cacophony of noise, all the smoke blocking your view. Out here, guys are realizing they haven't yet had enough training. Now, the weaponry that the soldiers are handling today, there's a variety of guns here, but standard infantry arms of the Civil War, 58 caliber single shot muzzle loading percussion cap ignition system tool. Now, multiple shot weaponry existed, but neither side invested in them too heavily, especially at the early point in the war. And part of that is the old Army bias towards these civilian soldiers. If we give them a gun that's going to shoot all day long, or throughout an entire minute they can spray a whole lot of bullets downfield, they're just going to make all those bullets miss. So instead, if we give them a gun that'll shoot once about every 20 or 30 seconds, they're going to make every shot count. Attention, detail. Shoulder, arms. All right, now for the infantryman, this is the standard method of marching around with the gun. It weighs between 8 or 10 pounds depending upon your model. That gets heavier as the day goes on. This keeps the butt of the gun off the ground so you're not dragging it into the rocks, roots, into the water. Also, the top of the gun is at about the same level as the top of their head. So as you're marching through a forest, you're not catching that on any tree limb or anything. But in order to load and shoot a muzzle loading weapon, the muzzle of the gun is going to have to be brought down towards the ground so that they can see it and deal with it with their eyes and their hands. Now, this first time we're going to go through all the period commands, and I'm going to provide some context for you in between the period commands so you understand why the guys are doing what they're doing. When we get towards the commands ready, aim, and fire, everyone familiar with those. They are going to do an about face. We're not going to make your day that exciting. So, in order to load a muzzle loading weapon, the first command that the soldiers would receive is load in 9 times, load. All right, the butts of the gun are brought down in between the feet. It's held outward at a little bit of a cocked angle. If you've already fired the gun a couple of times, you don't want to pour gunpowder in there. There could be a spark or ember still in the breech of the gun. The gun could cook off before you even put the bullet in. That would singe your chin whiskers or your face. You don't want to burn yourself with your own gun. Their right hands went over towards their cartridge box, a leather cartridge or container containing cartridges. That's great. The Civil War rounds or bullets. Leather is a relatively fireproof and waterproof material. You want to keep your gunpowder dry. You also want to prevent any incoming flame or spark from hitting it, because then it would go up on your own person, and that's going to be the end of you. So the next command is handle cartridge. They pull back that leather flap. They reach inside and they grab out a cartridge. It's a paper sleeve or cylinder about the same dimensions of an adult human finger. Inside that is the black granulated bits, the gunpowder, and also in the case of the real rounds of the war, that 58 caliber lead slug. Now, some of the weaponry is 54 caliber, some of the guns were 69 caliber. It's a quartermaster's nightmare if in the midst of the battle a unit is running low on ammo and they ask for a resupply and instead the wrong box is brought towards them. So both sides tried towards standardization and 58 caliber would become the standard. Now, in order to expose the powder, the next command is tear cartridge. It was brought up towards the mouth. They use a pair of matching teeth to tear that paper sleeve open. It's then brought towards the muzzle of the gun, and they're ready for the next command, charge cartridge. It's poured over. Now, courtesy of gravity, most of those black bits are going all the way down towards the breech of the gun, like salt out of the salt shaker is going to fall down onto your cheeseburger or your steak. In the case of the real rounds, they would grab out the lead slug, insert it on the top. Now, like bullets of today, it's got a conical point on one end, and in order to seat that, though, fully into the breech of the gun, they're ready for the next command of draw rammer. They pull out their ramrods. These are very slim steel pipes. They have a tulip-shaped bloom on one end, which matches the conical nose of the bullet. When you insert that downward, you don't want to mash the nose of the bullet too much, so it seats the entire object down without putting too much undue stress on the point for aerodynamic purposes. They're ready for the next command of ram cartridge. Now, every time you fire the gun, there's a little bit of fouling found inside the barrel. Reduces the diameter of the barrel ever so slightly. That action is going to get harder and harder as you fire your gun repeatedly. You might need a nearby rock or a tree trunk or some other solid object in order to seat the ramrod all the way down. And then you got to extract it because you need it for the next round. The next command, return rammer. They return it to a series of barrel bands where it rests underneath the barrel of the gun. You could leave it in there. It's going to fly downfield and maybe make a lethal projectile as well, but makes your own gun worthless for the rest of the day. You'd have to borrow a ramrod from a colleague, a friend, a relative, a cousin right next to you. All right, now as we go through the final commands, just an obligatory safety message. For young people, you've maybe heard louder things before in life, but it can be startling, so you might want to cover your ears. And anyone has a pet, certainly please do hold on to the leash.
This guy.
Ready.
Yeah, me too. I can't.
Prime. I'm an artillery officer. All right, they've reached inside their cap pouch, a small leather container found on the belt. Inside that are hundreds or a couple dozen worth of percussion caps, a copper top hat, like the size of a dinner pea. That is inserted onto the top of the vent of the gun, the cone, which provides the slim column of air down into the breech of the gun. They pulled the hammers back towards half cock, and the next command, ready. Hammers are brought back towards full cock. The guns are now ready to be fired. Next command is fairly self-explanatory. Aim. Fire. Cover, arms. Shoulder, arms. Now, no officer is going to go through all those commands every single time in the midst of a battlefield. The sound of the guns is going to drown out the human voices. Now, the guys are supposed to be well-trained and disciplined, and they know what to do intuitively. They've gone through this before. So the officers are going to take the easy way out. They're going to say, load and fire at will. Load! Everybody, like an automaton, a robot, goes through all those motions, all those commands at their own pace. Every team sport has a couple all-stars. Some guys who maybe aren't quite so good. So some soldiers are going to make their gun go off at different rates. Now the soldier in the red shirt has a misfiring gun. So he's trying multiple caps to make that first round go off.
Uh-oh.
She sees him, the dog.
Yeah, let's go over there.
She likes to play.
He's not happy.
No, she wants to play with the dog. She's like, I see a buddy over there. I don't care what you guys are doing. I want to play.
Oh, it's not that.
All right, the first Minnesota has successfully produced a volley. Incidentally, the two fellows in blue are portraying Union soldiery. The fellow in the red is the 1st Minnesota Infantry. They're battle shirts, an effort to really make a spectacle of themselves and be impressive on a battlefield. And the soldier in the gray is your standard Confederate attire that was developed after the first big battle. In this first big fight, in the Manasses area, there are over 200 outfits. Look at you guys. You all have something slightly different on. Imagine, out here in a battle, you haven't yet been introduced to everyone else in your own army. Who's a friend, who's a foe, how do you know? Shoot first, ask questions later. Friendly fire accidents are a cause for maybe a quarter or a third of the losses suffered out here by both sides. One of the hard lessons learned the hard way. Let's get uniformity to the uniforms.
Yeah.
可是那俩穿那个民兵衣服的，反而是北方的。
对呀，北方那会儿没
Are you good, Patrick?
可是北方是正规军呢。南方有钱。
All right, they're going to provide one more volley fire, which is an entire regiment of battle lines shooting all their weapons all at once. This is a standard tactic of the time. It's like sending a curtain of lead downfield, like your lawnmower blade cuts through all the blades of grass at the same moment. It's going to have not only a literal impact on the opposition force across from you, but a psychological one as well. When all of a sudden, instantaneously, friends and relatives, neighbors are going down. Ready. Aim. Fire. Recover arms. Prime. All right, as a safety procedure, they're just going to put another cap on there. Make sure that all the powder has gone off. Ready. Aim. Fire. Recover arms. Shoulder arms. About face. Present arms. That's a salute. Now some of them are going to have to rapidly change into artillerymen for the big gun shooting, but I can handle questions at this point. The wind wasn't favoring you, so you didn't get a sense of the smell of a Civil War battlefield today. But it's the sulfur, the charcoal, it's like rotten eggs. And that smoke is going to permeate into the clothing, your nostril hairs. You're going to stink and smell like that after a battle. The soldiers, the Confederate Army moving into Maryland after the second battle out here. Some of the Maryland civilians hadn't yet had a big army marching through their towns. The curious indication was that they could smell the Confederates coming before they saw them.
Yeah, that's what
An army of homeless guys, literally living outside 24/7.
How accurate could they shoot with a gun like this?
Sure. She's wondering about the accuracy. The gun would be labeled accurate to 300, maybe 500, some claim even 900 yards. From where you are towards the tree line is about 400 yards.
Wow.
Now what that means is a talented guy with great eyesight and calm nerves might very well hit a human being sitting over there.
Oh, no, that's
Yeah. Very few of the soldiers are sharpshooters. They're common people like you, like me. They've got variegated, eyesight. Nowadays we all have glasses or contacts if we need them. Back then that was not the case. The smoke blocks your view. Sometimes you're not even able to see the effective range of the gun. But every soldier wants to make their gun go bang, so you have some influence on what's happening in front of you and the guys who are shooting at you. So they're taught to aim it properly in the horizontal plane, and that lead object is going downfield. Maybe you're hitting somebody. Now the tactical formations, the shoulder to shoulder to shoulder that you saw, envision like you guys on the rope line, that's a Civil War regiment. You present yourself kind of as a larger horizontal target, right? Kind of easier for you to hit. But the reasons why they're doing this is to amass your own firepower so that the most number of guns stretched out in a linear way are able to all shoot in the same direction at the same time. It also makes communication a lot easier. The human voice, again, not going to reach everybody all over the hilltop if everyone is going wherever they please. Looking out for number one. Other questions? Yeah, he's wondering about guerrilla tactics. The word is based on the Spanish small war. It is going to occur in the Civil War, but as its name implies, it has to be done on a small scale basis. John Mosby, a Confederate partisan ranger, or some might claim a guerrilla fighter here in the Northern Virginia regions, with a couple hundred guys that fade in and out of soldiering, masquerade as civilians other days, not wearing a uniform like what we're wearing every single day. These tactics were not commonly employed, and they have to be used at a small scale because you can't have an army of 10,000 or 30,000 guys all looking out for their own rock, their own stump, their own tree to hide behind. And if an army does that, it becomes chaos and anarchy, and everybody's starting to worry about their own stomach. So instead of worrying about the opposition, they're stealing the apples from that farmer, they're stealing the corn from this farmer, the officer's control of that, not to be had. So neither side goes thoroughly towards guerrilla war as the way to fight the war. Now also, like wars throughout human history, an army is a massive force. They're able to exert their force on the guerrillas. It's like the cow with the mosquitoes. The cow's tail is whapping a whole lot of mosquitoes. Now all those mosquitoes are taking their bite out of the cow. Maybe, just maybe, that cow's gonna go down with 10,000 mosquito bites, but maybe 9,980 mosquitoes got whapped before the cow goes down. So guerrilla warfare sometimes achieves, the other side to quit, but it doesn't always achieve it, and it's at the expense of an awful lot of guerrillas. Tons of guerrillas. Not talking about the mammalian relative of ours. This gorilla right here. Yeah. It's Guerrilla. Questions? What's the average age? He's wondering about the average age. The bulk of the pie chart are guys between 18 and 30. That's far more than 50% of the Army. Like armies throughout human history, they're comprised of young guys who haven't yet established a career for themselves. They're not yet married. They don't have as many home front attachments. The military is a way to escape the boredom of dad's farm, the way to make a name for yourself, get a steady paycheck. Uncle Sam, in the case of the Union, is going to feed you and give you the clothing also, so your money doesn't have to go on to that. It can go to the fun stuff, right? Like the sports car. But there are guys that are older than 30, of course. There's lots of 30-somethings in the Army. There's 40-somethings as well. The Confederacy, by the second half of the war, is going to start robbing the cradle and the grave. They didn't have enough available manpower to comprise their armies of only guys between 18 and 40. So they're taking 15 and 16-year-olds by the latter stage of the war, usually to do home front assignments like guarding Union prisoners like at Andersonville. They're not in Robert E. Lee's army at the fighting front. And then they're also taking the old guys who are as high as 55 or so in age. But why aren't lots of 55-year-olds in the military today? Same reason as any time throughout human history. The body breaks down, Older guys have already established a career. They also don't have the immortality complex that younger people do. Younger people think I'm invincible, I'm never going to get hurt, I can drive double the speed limit, there's not going to be a problem. When you're 40 or 45 or 55, you start to recognize this is foolish, you know, I'm not doing this. Other questions before we segue towards artillery?
How many troops would be in a line? You have what, 4 or 5? How many troops would be in a line?
A regiment on paper has 1,000 guys.
1,000 guys.
No regiment is ever that lucky. There's always a percentage of guys that are on the sick roll in the hospitals, doing odd detail jobs elsewhere. But in this first big battle of the war, regiments are new and relatively flush with numbers, so you'd have as many as 600, maybe 700 or 800 guys in a regiment in a fighting front. By the surrender at Appomattox, there are Confederate regiments that are single digits. Desertion, another cause of loss.
Now we saw the, we saw the British during the Revolution did have parallel lines. So someone goes down to the front.
Yeah, we did firing with just a single rank. A regiment would have 2 ranks, a front rank and a rear rank, and due to the length of the barrel of the gun, the fellows in the rear are able to point it between heads of friends in the front and still make their gun go off. And taller guys like you are going to be in the rear rank, shorter guys like Patrick and I were in the front. That means we're taking some of the bullets that might have gone into you. However, for the shot that goes over our head and we say, wow, that was a close one, it hit you right in the face.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to segue towards artillery at this point, and we're going to make the big gun go off twice with 10 minutes in between, and the cannoneers will come on forward, explain their implements, their job, what they do to make the gun go off. But I'll handle some of the narration over towards my colleague here. This is Patrick. Let's welcome him here.
Thank you. My name is Patrick. I'm a volunteer here at Manasses National Battlefield, so welcome. Thank you all for coming out. Everybody wants to see the gun bark, so we're going to get right to it. I'll save most of the talking for the mandatory 10 minutes between firings that we have to observe for safety. But before we get there, I'll tell you a little bit about what you're looking at here. Today, we're doing a field artillery impression, which is your average Civil War artillery that you're going to think about when you think of the Civil War. The infantry is out on the field and they have all the cannons behind them. It's these guys here. There are several types of artillery. There's mounted artillery, field artillery, light artillery, horse-drawn artillery, and heavy artillery. So it can get kind of bogged down in the details. So for today, we're going to focus on the units that were in the field. Now, what's behind me is a 10-pound Parrott rifle. It is invented by Robert Parker Parrott at the West Point Foundry, which is right across the river from the United States Military Academy at West Point in New York. It's made of cast iron, which is a really easy to manufacture kind of metal, which means they can rapid fire make a lot of these tubes and get them out into the field. Unfortunately, anybody that knows anything about blacksmithing and metallurgy knows that cast iron, when it becomes superheated and constantly used, is a brittle metal. So these guns develop a reputation through rapid fire in the field of barrel bursts. When a barrel bursts around a bunch of cannoneers, you can see where everybody's standing. It's bad news bears for everybody on my crew. Mortality rates are high. So to try to stem this and bring those casualty counts down, a wrought iron band is reinforced. When Greg, our second lieutenant, steps out of the way, you'll see a kind of thicker iron band around the back or the breech of the gun, and that's to try to contain the explosion when we yank on that lanyard. In terms of artillery in the field, you'll hear terms like gun, section, or battery. A gun is a single gun. When we're talking guns during the American Civil War, we're talking cannons. We're not talking the muskets and the small arms fire. Those are rifles. These can also be rifles. It gets very confusing. But for the sake, we're looking at a single gun here. 2 guns together will operate as a section, and 3 or more would be a battery. Now, so Confederate side of the war here, their Confederate batteries are between 3 and 4 guns grouped together, depending on when you're coming across the timeline of the war. Federal batteries are 4 to 6 guns. A little bit better supplied, a little more able to get into the field here. So today we're just going to operate as a single gun. And just to give you an idea, the artillery is some of the first elements of danger that infantry are going to encounter on the field. We're known as the long arm of the Army. So what we're going to do is demonstrate the techniques used by the cannoneers. We'll bring everybody up on the line. We'll tell you about our jobs on the cannon crew, and then once we've observed the safety time and we've answered a few questions, we'll fire the gun again, we'll secure it, we'll drop the rope here and you guys can get out real close, take pictures, ask questions, and things like that. So I'm obligated to remind you, just like with the infantry, this is going to be kind of loud. So what I would do is I would cover your ears if you're sensitive to sound. If you're holding on to a leash, make sure you got it tight. Small kids and, like I said, anybody who's sort of sensitive, this is a bigger one. And likewise, use your imagination and try to imagine dozens of these going off at one time. You know, just on this side of the field alone, and then in response there's even more of that going on, and all the while that we're talking about artillery here, there is small arms infantry happening right in between this. So we'll be with you guys in a moment here. Enjoy. Come here. Cannoneers to your post! Shell, 1,000 yards, load!
Shell, 1,000 yards.
It's good.
Gunner, Shell, 1,000 yards.
Done.
It's got below.
Good.
It's got below.
Ready. Fire!
Oh wow.
Cease fire! Secure the piece!
Oh my goodness. That
Like, what was that?
Wait, without risk.
We're gonna walk around.
Not very loud.
What was that?
Base is secure.
Cannoneers rest. Grab implements, fall in on me. All right. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah, it was.
Wow. Super loud. Super loud. Super loud. All right. So your average Cannoneer squad or team or crew, gun crew, is about 8 to 9 guys standing right around the immediate vicinity of the gun, between the limber, those of us in the middle, and right up on the gun. The most important member of this crew you're not going to see here today is actually the horses. So, you know, we need to move these guns in rapid time. We need to redeploy somewhere on the field. We'll have teams of horses with further ammunition further back in a more safe environment, while often sometimes still under fire. But we'll start here with our number 1 Cannoneer, who will tell you about his job on our gun crew.
Hi, I'm Cannoneer number 1. My position is up front near the muzzle to the right. When we are told to load, I will approach with my sponge rammer. The sponge is damp. What I'm trying to do first is I will ram this down all the way to the breech. What I'm doing is trying to extinguish any embers from the prior powder bag, so that when we insert a new one, that doesn't go off prematurely. I'll withdraw this, switch over to the rammer, which, as you can see, is cup shaped underneath the projectile. Now I will signal number 2 by tapping the muzzle. Number 2 will put in the powder charge. I will ram that down all the way to the breech first. He will then insert the projectile. I will then use again the rammer to ram that down so that it is seated right up against the powder bag. At that point, my job is done. I withdraw this and return to my position next to the muzzle.
Hi folks, I'm number 2. I'm on the left of the barrel. As you just heard, the charge is delivered to me. I deliver it to number 1 who sees that charge. In the case of a misfire, I also have some duties. which hopefully you guys will never get to see. At the end of every firing, I use this lovely tool, implement right here, to pull out any refuse from the shell, and I'll pull it out that way.
Good afternoon. I'm the Cannoneer number 3. When the command is load, I stop the vent with this funny looking thing. It's a piece of leather that goes to the vent hole and it keeps in the air from getting in and out when the Cannoneer number 1 is slamming and spunning at the gun. Then I go back to the trail spike after the gun is loaded and move the gun left or right, depending on where the gunner wants me to move it. I step outside the wheel and go tell the man ready. I step inside the wheel, take the pick, it penetrates the powder bag. Number 4 steps over, he puts the primer in, I hold it, we watch each other until he springs up this lanyard, and then I return to my position. He nods to me.
Cannoneer number 4, I'm the trigger man. Once number 3 has exposed the powder, I insert a friction primer into the vent. It's a small brass tube filled with very fine gunpowder, fulminated mercury at the top, plug the beeswax at the bottom, and attach a lanyard to it. The lanyard allows me and everybody else to be outside the wheel when the gun goes off, because with a live round, this is going to roll back several yards, so everybody has to be outside of the wheels. When the command fire is given, I pull the lanyard, it pulls this wire out of the primer, which ignites it and sends a jet of flame down in and hopefully sets off the main charge.
I'm Cannoneer number 5. I'm the runner stationed between the limber and the gun. My job is to get the ammunition from the 2 gentlemen stationed at the limber and convey it up to the gun to be loaded. Along the way, I check to make sure that it's I check with the gunner to make sure it's the round that he called for, and I carry that live powder in a leather satchel to protect it from sparks. I probably get to do the most running on the crew, but my position is filled once I've delivered the ammunition to the barrel of the gun.
Morning, afternoon, folks. I'm Rolf Ladol. I'm playing 6 and he's playing 7. So our job is basically to manage the magazine, or the limber, if you will, for that gun. All the munitions, all the powder, all that stuff is actually stored in the limber there. We'll actually attach to the cannon piece itself once it's limbered up and moving out. So once either the battery commander, the gunner, or chief of the piece will call for such and such shell at a certain range. So basically this is kind of the gunnery table, if you will, what we manage on that as far as when we set the fuse. The range determines the time of flight. The time of flight will determine what the fuse setting is. So for the munitions sake, we actually have 4 types of munitions that we have back there. One is solid shot or bolt. It'll look similar like this, but it won't have a nose piece on there, and it will have the sabot on there. It's kind of elongated because it's a rifle piece. It's solid, it weighs about 10 pounds. Ergo, the name, 10-pound parrot rifle. This piece here, also another, would be a shell. The shell consists of, looks about the same, but would have a nose piece or a fuse piece on there, sabot, but it's hollow and it's filled with gunpowder. The idea is once the range is called, you cut the fuse, which is about the size of about a cigarette, and you kind of fit in this hole here. The idea is once the gun is fired, the flames will come and lick the fuse and count down the timed fuse. It's all pyrotechnic. The other type of fuse, also used, not commonly used, is like a contact or percussion fuse, which will actually explode when it hits the ground. But for a pyrotechnic fuse, the idea is to have the thing explode in the air, creating shrapnel, etc., to make the most damage. So this is shell, predominantly used, very effective against horse-borne, maybe limber, or artillery and limber, cavalry. The reason why is it makes a big, loud bang when it explodes. Not so much in shrapnel because the pieces are relatively large, so off this you might get 5 or 6 pieces. The third portion is called case shot. Same techniques as far as what's used in the shell. Instead of just filled with powder, would be filled with like little balls of about the size of a marble, iron balls in here along with the powder. So what that does is basically create a shrapnel area, a sphere if you will. Again, explode in the air, not quite as big as a shell, but it's more denser, so it's liable to hit, say more your target would be more or less infantry, that type of thing. These are more kind of longer range, all the way out to 2,300 yards. even down to as close as you want to get. The fourth type of munition that we have in here is called the canister. Kind of looks like what? Shotgun shell. So it's all filled with the same type of iron pieces in here. This would be balls and also sawdust, etc. The sample is a piece of wood, but you can see this is all in one piece, and the powder bag would be also fixed to this. So this only has to be loaded in there once. You don't have to follow it with powder bag first and the shell first. But the idea, this is more of a close range. It's wrapped in tin. You're looking at 200, maybe 300 yards max. This is totally a counter personnel or counter infantry type of munition. Cannons being overrun, this is probably what you want to use.
Now as an artilleryman, sometimes you'll hear in the reenacting community, it's like our favorite round to fire. In reality, it's probably our least favorite round to fire. The reality of the situation is if we're firing that, the infantry on the other side of the field can absolutely hit us with their fire. And as you can see, there's 7 of us. And if we have a regiment or a small company coming across the field, we're very easily outgunned, and none of us have anything other than our hands and our cannons usually. So canister is meant to do maximum damage very quickly so that you can redeploy your gun and get out of there, because you're not really going to try to hang around while the infantry's overrunning. Any questions real quick before we get into the second fire?
And one question. How many balls are in that round? What's the length of it? How far will that go out?
What, 27 balls in there? About 27, I believe. Again, it's going to vary between gun to gun. Probably more effective with this would be your 12-pound Napoleon, which would be a little bit bigger, a little bit wider, and more balls in there. So, depends on the gun.
All right.
So, the road is where the artillery mine was.
So in this specific spot, they were coming right out of the woods, right across the field from us, where the cannons are all set up now. And the federal response, the artillery was sent up here more or less unsupported by infantry, and they're going to kind of come up here piecemeal. These guns are going to exchange hands a few times before they're ultimately overran and taken by the Confederates. So once the action up here starts, and the initial overrun of Jackson's troops over Ricketts and Griffin's battery here happens, there's about 2 more hours of fighting. But this is a point-blank fight, because we're talking guns like the one we're firing here that have max effective ranges of a little over 2,000 yards and more, and then smoothbore cannons that have similar but slightly less ranges of 1,800, 2,000, things like that. We're like 300 to 400 yards from that tree line. So you can imagine here, before any small arms fire gets involved, in terms of just artillery, this is a point-blank fight. I mean, we're right up in the danger zone here. So then there's small arms fire moving across this field. So this was a very intimate action up here on the field.
How long do you need to begin to fire?
For us today, modern 21st century safety, we need to have 10 minutes, which we've just about exhausted, so we'll get to firing in a second. But in reality, there wasn't that rule. This is a war. You wanted to get as much ammo downrange as quickly as you can. So in reality, you could fire once about every 30 seconds. In reality, it devolved to about once every minute or so. Again, like I was saying at the beginning, rapid fire superheats these barrels. And specifically with the gun we're firing, when you superheat that kind of cast iron, it gets really brittle and it can explode. And if the barrel explodes, I'm going to lose all my cannoneers in one shot. And then that's pointless, and we're just running away at that point. So we'll hold all questions just for a minute. We'll fire this gun one more time. We'll secure it, and then we'll drop the white line here, and you guys can come on out, get real close, ask questions, take pictures, and things like that. So cannoneers, to your posts!
Thanks for making this hard.
Infantry advancing! Canister load!
Hey.
Canister, boys.
Let's go below.
did.
You're probably all dressed in black.
No, that's not a
Yeah.